All right, so let's dive into something that's pretty relevant to men's health in the UK, prostate cancer screening. And we've got some insights from a YouTube channel, GP Chat UK, which I think will help as we go through this. Um, you see, prostate cancer is the most common cancer among men here in the UK, and there's just a lot of discussion about screening. To be honest, sometimes a lot of confusion too, so we're going to try to cut through all that and figure out what's really going on, especially for those over 50.
Yeah, it's a really important conversation to have, especially with all the ins and outs of prostate cancer screening.
Absolutely. One of the things that really stuck out to me is that the UK doesn't have a national screening program for this,
Yeah.
unlike some other cancers. And I know that has a lot to do with the main screening test we use, the
Yeah.
PSA test, but can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So the PSA test, that stands for prostate-specific antigen. It measures how much of this antigen is in your blood. And high levels can mean prostate cancer. But it's not always that simple. The PSA test is, well, it's a bit of a troublemaker sometimes. Sometimes it can give you a false positive. So you might get a result that looks worrying even if you don't have cancer. And then on the other hand, it can give a false negative too, which means it looks like everything is fine when it might not be.
So it's kind of double-edged sword then.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
it could give you some answers,
Yeah.
but it also causes a lot of anxiety and uncertainty along the way.
Yeah, exactly. Those false positives can lead to biopsies and even treatment that you don't need, and those come with their own risks. Plus, it's just incredibly stressful. Can you imagine being told you might have cancer and going through more tests and procedures only to find out it was all a mistake?
Yeah.
That takes a toll.
Yeah. And then you have to think about the men who get a false negative. They think they're in the clear,
Yeah.
and maybe that delays the diagnosis. When getting treatment earlier could have made a big difference.
You're right. That's a really important point. Those false negatives are dangerous because they can mean a cancer isn't found until it's more advanced and potentially more aggressive. It's this balance between the good and the bad of the PSA test that makes it so complicated.
So how does the UK handle prostate cancer screening then? If there's no national program and the PSA test has all these issues.
Well, instead of a national program, we have the Prostate Cancer Risk Management Program. It's called the PCRMP. And this gives men over 50 the option to ask their GP for a PSA test. The key is making an informed decision. Men need to understand what the test can and can't tell them before they decide.
That makes sense. But is everyone who needs this information actually getting it? I saw a statistic from prostate cancer research that said almost 2/3 of Black people in the UK believe that racial discrimination has made it harder for them to get prostate cancer tests. That's really worrying.
It is, and it shows that there are disparities in awareness and access, even when the tests are available. We know that some groups, like Black men and those with a family history of prostate cancer, are at higher risk. And making sure they have equal access to information and testing is absolutely critical.
So even though the PSA test might be controversial,
Mm-hmm.
early detection is still really important, right?
Absolutely. The earlier we find prostate cancer, the better the chance of treating it successfully. This is particularly important because early on, prostate cancer is often slow growing and doesn't cause any symptoms you would notice. That's why finding it early is so important.
That makes me wonder, if the PSA test isn't perfect, what are the alternatives? What's coming up in the future of prostate cancer screening?
That's where things get really interesting. There are some exciting developments, especially with the Transform trial. It's gotten a lot of funding from the UK government.
Okay, tell me more about Transform. What makes it so groundbreaking?
Well, what's really cool about Transform is that it's designed to look at new and potentially better ways to screen for prostate cancer. They're looking at things like MRI scans, which can actually create a picture of the prostate gland, so it gives us a much more detailed view than just the PSA test alone. The trial has hundreds of thousands of men from all over the country. It's one of the biggest studies of its kind that's ever been done. So you might be wondering, why MRI? Oh, well, unlike the PSA test, an MRI can actually see the prostate gland and pinpoint any areas that look suspicious. That could mean that men with a high PSA, but a normal MRI might not need a biopsy.
So MRI could give us more accurate and focused results? That's amazing. What kind of impact could Transform have on prostate cancer screening here in the UK if it's successful?
Well, we hope it could give us the evidence we need to finally set up a national screening program, one that's both accurate and effective. If the researchers can show that these new methods, like MRI, really do reduce the number of men dying from prostate cancer, and that we can use them for a lot of people, it could completely change how we find prostate cancer in this country.
That sounds really promising. It feels like there's a real push for change on this issue now. I even read that Sir Chris Hoy, the Olympic cyclist, has been speaking out about it.
Yeah, he has. Sir Chris has been campaigning to lower the age when men are offered PSA tests, especially for those with a family history of prostate cancer. His personal story and his platform have definitely helped to raise awareness and bring this issue to the forefront.
It's amazing how someone with such a big public profile can use their influence like that to advocate for change and potentially make a difference in public health policy. Has the government responded to this call for action at all?
Yes, actually. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, recently announced he's asked for a review of the current guidelines on prostate cancer screening, which suggests we might see some policy changes soon. That's a good sign.
It does sound like things are finally moving in the right direction. That must be really reassuring for men across the UK, knowing that these issues are being taken seriously.
It is, but while we wait for those bigger changes, there's still things men can do to be proactive about their prostate health.
So, given what we now know about the limitations of the PSA test, how can men be proactive? What should they be talking to their GPs about?
Well, if you're a man over 50, the first step is to have an open conversation with your GP. Even though there isn't a national screening program, you have the right to request a PSA test through the PCRMP. Your GP can help you weigh up the pros and cons and decide what's best for you.
That's so important. It really puts men in control of their own health. It allows them to make informed decisions. But beyond the PSA test, are there other things men should be aware of when it comes to prostate health?
Absolutely. Staying at a healthy weight, eating a balanced diet, and getting regular exercise are all good for your overall health. And that includes your prostate health. There's more and more research coming out suggesting that certain lifestyle choices can have a positive impact on prostate cancer risk.
It's interesting how these everyday choices can really make a difference to our health.
They really can. And of course, it's important to pay attention to your body and let your doctor know about any unusual symptoms right away. Things like difficulty urinating, pain when you urinate, or blood in your urine or semen. Those should never be ignored.
So being proactive and staying informed are key. It sounds like we're really on the cusp of some amazing progress in prostate cancer screening in the UK. It's been fascinating learning about all of this with you.
It really has. I think the big takeaway here is that knowledge is power. The more men know about prostate cancer, the better they can be at making decisions about their health.
You're absolutely right. It's about taking control and being proactive. So to wrap up, let's leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked a lot about the medical stuff, but what about the emotional side of things? How can men get past the fear and the stigma around prostate cancer and feel empowered to get help when they need it?
That's a really important point. Prostate cancer can be a tough thing to talk about, but talking openly with the people you love and your healthcare team is crucial. It's okay to ask questions, to get support, and to advocate for yourself.
That's a great message to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.